Writers are made and not born. I really do believe that. I believe that anybody can learn to write and anybody can learn to edit written copy because nobody gets it right the first time. If you can apply some of the principles I'm about to lay down, you will learn how to edit yourself to get better copy to your client, and you will learn how to edit other people's writing in a way that gets to the heart of why doesn't that sound right. I'm Joy Yule from Hire a Writer. Hire a Writer is a copywriting agency. You can follow us online and subscribe to this channel for more copywriting tips. Anytime you go to edit something, you need a guide, you need a checklist. There are always going to be specific categories of content that you need to be looking for and that you need to be checking content for. So again, all of these principles are going to apply whether you're writing your own content and then want to edit yourself so that you get a better final product, or whether you're editing for somebody else. These are loosely based on the Hire a Writer Editor Guide, which I will acknowledge is the most edited thing in my entire world. Because we're always finding new things that you're like, yeah, we should check for that. Or yeah, that's a consistent issue across the board in writing, things like that. So all of our work in writing and editing millions of words a year is gonna help you right now. I'm gonna address 3 broad categories: editing text, SEO analysis and scoring, and then markup and comments. So these are kind of the 3 broad categories we're gonna work through, and we're gonna start with editing text. And this is where we get a little bit nerdy because there are going to be some grammatical things, punctuation things, some standardized things that you have to take care of. If you are writing for a client, sometimes that client will have a brand guide or a voice structure, that you kind of have to follow that relates to use of punctuation, use of contractions, how they do money or numbers or things like that. I will say 90% of the time, you're not gonna get that. So it's best to develop it for yourself to kind of have a standardized way that you write. And it may align with like AP, like Associated Press guidelines, or MLA, or other kind of standard style guides that you can have access to. So when you're editing text, the basic areas you need to look for are language, grammar, punctuation, and voice and article structure. Within language, grammar, and punctuation, there are definitely some common issues that you want to look for and catch. So I will have all of this written out on the blog, and you can definitely reference it there. It may be easier for you to go back to it if you have a written version, but for now you can kind of just listen and follow along. First is abbreviations, acronyms, and initials. So 2 rules of thumb. Obviously, abbreviations should only be used if you're writing a fairly casual document or it's common knowledge. So like you don't want to say obs, right? Obvious, obs. You might say that like in a text to a friend, but you're probably not going to write it on a blog because most people don't know what it means. And then for acronyms, make sure the first time you reference something that is commonly an acronym, you should always spell it out. So even if everybody knows that USDA stands for the US Department of Agriculture, the first time you use it in a document, you need to spell it out and then have USDA, the acronym, in parentheses, just like you see on the screen here. From that point on, once you've done that, you can refer to it as USDA throughout the course of the document, doesn't matter. Second, bulleted lists. This is a pet peeve of mine. Is the first word capitalized? Are there periods at the end of each bulleted item? Do you need an M dash? I don't really care what you do, and honestly, there is no global standard that says you have to do it a certain way. Just pick a style and stick to it. Okay, third is commas. Oxford or no Oxford? People literally lose relationships over this. So decide which you're gonna use and standardize it throughout. Serial commas, ugh, the bane. Okay, hyperlinks, are they used over the right words and in the right way? So in my world, if you include the period or the end punctuation in that hyperlink, I will fire you. It's not a good idea, but maybe that's what you want to do. Either way, do it the same way every time. Numbers, common practice. You usually spell out 1 through 9 and then use numerals for 10 and above. This is a pretty easy thing to check for, but if you miss it and there's a lack of standardization, it's problematic. Money, be sure money is expressed correctly, especially when you're talking about thousands, millions, and billions. You need to have it really standardized. If you do a lot of newsjacking blogs, you're gonna know that AP style is gonna dictate how you do this. Okay versus okay. Decide, standardize. Again, there's no hard and fast rule, just make it the same. Pronouns, a lot of writers, this is a big, an issue a lot of people have. A lot of writers attribute they to companies, but companies aren't people. You also need to check for gendered pronouns. You know now that you don't use he or she. You can use they, not a problem, unless you're James Acaster. And then sources, check every source. It's the worst part of editing, especially long documents, but you have to do it. Click on all of them, make sure they're correct, relevant, and current. And then time and dates. Standardize how these are written. Write them the same way every time. So that's the language, grammar, and punctuation. And I know it's tedious, and this is where a guide comes in handy. Because again, if you are not standardized, it's amateur hour. Okay, if stuff changes, and that's this next one that we're going to talk about is really a big deal for me in that. So you have all of your punctuation, abbreviation, all of that needs to be the same. Don't change it. The other thing that needs to be cohesive throughout the course of a document that you really need to check for in editing is voice and structure considerations. If you change the tense, like you can't even call yourself a writer. Like, please don't do that. But so don't change the tense, don't change the voice, don't change the perspective from which you're speaking, don't switch from first person to third person. Okay, there's just really basic stuff like that that should be pretty foundational to your understanding of language. And if it isn't, I would really suggest that maybe find a master class, find an online class, get your grammar down, understand how the building blocks of language contribute to speech, and that's really important that it is standardized. So there are two basic things that you're going to look for when you're editing a document for voice and structure. So voice is really just the tone. This is going to change based on who you're speaking at. So if you're writing as a life coach versus if you're writing as a cybersecurity firm, your tone is going to change. Make sure that you establish it to begin with, and this is where some of the work comes in, where you need to think about how you charge clients, because there's an amount of time it takes to understand how to speak as somebody. And it's important to do that research, because I've done it before, where you get cocky and you think, oh yeah, I've written for this kind of company before, and you get like halfway through a document and then you go to their website and you're like, oh, that's not how they talk. So do some research, figure out if they don't have a distinct voice yet, figure out how other people in the industry communicate, and then figure out what's the best way to say things. How are you wording things? How formal are you versus conversational? There's just going to be a tone of voice that you need to strike. So when you edit, it's a really good chance, hopefully you've done that work to begin with, written the copy, but then when you edit, you really do need to step back and say, did I achieve kind of what I think would be the best practice for this, or am I in alignment with what the client dictated? And then article structure. So you need to check for a focus keyword, you need to check that your word count is in the right place, you need to check that the formatting is correct. So is it a step-by-step document? Is it a 10 things document? Make sure the 10 is actually numbered in the list, things like that. So just double check the structure that you've created and make sure everything is on point. As an editor, I strongly suggest you check the brackets. So a lot of editors will have a sequence of the way that they go through a document, and you may want to establish that for yourself. Even if you're just reading your own content, go back, and the first thing you need to reread is the first paragraph and the last paragraph. Are the brackets intact? Does the first paragraph adequately hook the reader? Is it interesting, exciting? Does it lay out what to expect in the article and invite them to continue reading? And then the end. Does the end adequately summarize the content? Does it wrap it up? Does it give it a good CTA? If you've got the bracketed material in place, good chances you went correctly conceptually through the document in a way that makes sense to the reader. So check the brackets first. So the second major category after you've gone through all of that I would suggest that you have in place is the SEO structure. So I'm actually going to give you right now a list of the things that our writers are required to check for in SEO analysis. Again, these will be on the blog if you want the print version, but you can read along on the screen. It says our SEO analysis and text scoring. We just have little check boxes. So first, the H1 has the tier 1 keyword. The H2s all include tier 2 keywords exactly, and for key phrases in exact order. Remember, SEO keywords are exact. The text is broken up into short paragraphs of 3 to 5 sentences each. You don't want to have huge, long chunks of text of like 8, 10 paragraphs, unless this is a white paper or an ebook. There should be at least 2 to 3 internal links if they're available. There should be at least 2 to 3 external links to non-competitive external sources. Most of the time, these need to be really authoritative, and you need to make sure they're current. All the links work. That's one of the things that you have to do as an editor. Check them all. The link text should be at least 2 words and match the destination content. So we are not linking over throwaway phrases, right? We need to link to things that make sense. All SEO keywords are present. Usually you can just do like the Control F if you're on a PC and double check for all of those. If there are a lot of them, that step takes a lot of time. SEO keywords are distributed evenly through the text and they make sense. No keyword stuffing. The Tier 1 keyword is present in the first paragraph text. At least one Tier 2 keyword is in the first paragraph text. The meta description includes the Tier 1 keyword, one or more Tier 2 keywords, and a CTA. There is a succinct, coherent narrative flow to the document. There is enough substance to make this a valuable document to readers. It feels like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised. The tone is good. The tenses match. We're not going from past, present. The pronouns are correct and do not change. All technical information is accurate. There is some wit and conversationality. In the SEO world, we typically score text for plagiarism, readability, and word count. So those are the three things that we score, and we have like a little table in all of our SEO content documents that will give you a little place to insert that score. I would suggest to you, if you're a copywriter giving clients content, that you have that. It would not hurt to show them that you've done that work. And it's pretty easy to do. There's free resources for all of that. So that's basically, I get it, it's a lot, but if you can go to our website and look at the actual list in print form, but that's how I would suggest doing the SEO analysis and scoring for your editing checklist. The last big category is markup and comments. And actually, I find this to be the worst part of editing a document. So obviously, if you're doing it for yourself, you don't really have to do this. But if you're editing anybody else's content, you need to provide feedback on why something isn't correct, especially if there are consistent issues, if they're doing something wrong many times. Google Documents, you probably know, has the suggesting feature. If you go in and edit in suggestion mode, then all of your edits will show up, and the writer who's getting the document back after editing will have to go through and resolve all of those comments. But you want to provide meaningful and helpful feedback. We have a really, really strong standard that's like articulated in our editing guide, that the point of editing is to make people better writers. It's not to make them feel bad about themselves, and it's not to prove that you know more than they do. It's just to help them. It's just to be helpful and say, this is a consistent issue I see, let's work on this, right? Either you're doing too many if-then clauses, or your numbers are really inconsistent, or you didn't hit the word count for these last 5 pieces. It can be any nature of feedback, but the feedback should be constructive and helpful to people. So mark up the text, provide comments that actually help the writer improve. Editing requires a lot of focus. It's definitely not for everybody. And if you find yourself consistently having trouble uncovering why your writing is not well received, why your writing doesn't perform well, you may need to pass it by a professional editor. So you can feel free to contact the team at Hire a Writer. We can always do a one-off and edit something you've written and give you some feedback on why we think it's not working or the systematic issues we see. Anyone can improve in writing. As long as you are writing to humans, you will succeed. So I would suggest next that you watch this video on marketing writing for humans and subscribe to my channel to learn more about how to become an excellent copywriter.